Well, I think we've had some additional folks join. So again, just want to thank everyone for taking time this afternoon or morning or later afternoon to join us on a really cool topic for myself, and I know the rest of the Secure Smart Office team. And cybersecurity is a business decision. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Sam, I'll pass it over to you to kick things off.
Sounds good. And again, thank you everyone for showing up, and Corey, thanks for the introduction. Really, the main thing I wanted to chat through is that this will be recorded. So, if you have an issue with that, we completely understand. If you are on the list, this will be distributed after the fact. So if you feel more comfortable jumping off from being recorded, you can still have access to the webinar post completion, and we'll send that out as a link for everyone. It'll also be on our YouTube channel as soon as that's done processing. So that is it. And then we can just jump right in. Let's go to the first slide. All right, here are today's speakers. We've got Corey, Dave, Rusty, and myself. I'll be more of a moderator running through. Corey is from ArmorPoint, who we're super excited to partner up with on this. Dave Tuckman is our Director of Engineering, and Rusty is our CEO and co-founder of Secure Smart Office. And I'm Sam Sailors, President and co-founder of Secure Smart Office. And we'll just do a touch more on the introductions as we move our way through. Dave, you want to run us through who is Secure Smart Office?
I will do that if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Just gonna.
Yeah, we made an executive decision on that.
Executive decision. So Secure Smart Office, we're an IT company, but a cybersecurity company, and so all the IT that we do has security built into it from the ground up. So we provide IT to people, secured IT to people, but if they already have a great internal IT department, or they outsource their IT to a great managed service provider, then we act as a managed security services provider. So we provide the cybersecurity services for that internal IT or that external IT. We've been here in San Diego between this company and the acquisition of another company. What is it, going on 30 years now, right, Dave? Because we acquired Dave's company a few years ago.
Yeah.
And, at that time, Dave had been doing business here in San Diego for about 25 years. So it's kind of going on between the combination of his former company and our company about 30 years. And so we really do focus on providing the full spectrum of IT to companies. We focus on small and medium-sized companies. We do a lot of nonprofit, but also those that are subject to compliance. We're big on partnering, which is why we're here with ArmorPoint. But man, we'll do all the way from like a home office up to maybe like 300 people or so. You see some of the certifications here on the chart. We're really big on training and certifying. We are a Microsoft-focused house, so that we have the full stack all the way from your Windows 10 Pro and your Microsoft 365 up into Azure. So that's really our focus. That's where we train. That's where we certify. And we have augmented security capabilities like ArmorPoint to make sure that we have that additional security that's needed for our clients. Over to you.
Hey, and one thing real quick, if anybody watching has any questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. We want to make this as interactive as possible and certainly address anything anybody may be wondering. So we'll answer them as they come up, or if it makes more sense, we'll just tell you, and then we'll end. We've got a Q&A segment saved towards the end as well.
All right. Thank you, Dave. All right.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Sam.
No, I'm just saying, I'm giving it off to you. Go for it.
Beautiful. Yeah. So just a quick introduction to ArmorPoint. We're partnered with Secure Smart Office here. ArmorPoint is a SOC as a service, a complete security operations platform that is developed and owned by Trap Technology. Trap's been around since about 2007, doing a host of different technology services. And essentially, at one point, we realized, particularly for that small and medium-sized business, that cybersecurity was either too complex or too expensive. And so ArmorPoint became our brainchild and really our baby to bring that to those businesses who, as we're going to discuss today, really need to start thinking about cybersecurity, but historically have been, kind of handled with enterprise technology at enterprise pricing, and really have that firm belief that there is a really solid solution to not only protect and monitor your business, but partnering with folks like Secure Smart Office, really mature that overall organization from a business standpoint. And so we were super excited this year to announce that partnership with Secure Smart Office, and always happy to support them. We're really excited about the way that they view not just IT, but cybersecurity as a whole. And so excited to jump into that conversation. So with that, I'll pass it here in a second to the rest of the SSO team. But I really do believe that cyber is a business decision, period, right? Just like it says here. To grow, to scale, to be a competitive SMB, small, medium-sized business, and compete with some of those larger companies out there, cybersecurity needs to be at the core of what you do, from a culture standpoint, from how you develop your products or your mission. Without that, you can't, compete in compliance-heavy industries. You can't answer RFPs, questionnaires, and I do firmly believe that as we continue to move through this decade, more and more companies are going to be asking, what is your cyber policy? And so now's the time to really build that out. And I think with that, I'll pass it to Dave and Rusty to talk a little bit about their viewpoints here and how the Secure Smart Office team, can assist.
Yeah, I do want to, I mean, just as you're talking through that, just all is going through my head, where we worked with companies that were like smaller companies, but they wanted to grow and do business for larger companies. So we were working with one of the companies here in downtown San Diego that was beginning to enter the business of doing some marketing and stuff for some of the Fortune 50 companies. Well, the Fortune 50 companies would come down and say, okay, you need to meet this specific cybersecurity requirements document, or you can't have a contract with us because you're actually going to be holding materials for us that maybe we're going to release to the public 6 months from now in our advertising, and you need to protect that. So there's an example of where this company just really wasn't prepared for that. So we partnered with them and we installed all the cybersecurity necessary for those Fortune 50 companies to be able to answer their questionnaires. And then the same thing kind of like on a compliance or even in a cyber insurance perspective. Now cyber insurance companies are beginning to look at this and say, this really is, you guys need to change the way you're doing business because we've changed the way that we're doing business, right? So now they have all these questionnaires. They have these criteria that you have to pass before you can even get policies with them, much less get a better rate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things there that you touched on that really are sometimes back of mind when you think about cybersecurity. And I think one of those is it is a competitive advantage. More and more people are asking, hey, are you doing this? And, investing in it today and really thinking about what, we preach people, process, technology all the time. And I know, Rusty and Dave feel the same way. You need the right people and technology, and everyone thinks technology first, but it really starts with those processes. NIST cybersecurity framework, CIS 20. I know, Secure Smart Office has a really great way to help coach through that here in a little bit that we'll go over. But establishing just what is that framework and foundation, and then building, those people on top and those partners and those technologies. I think that really gives you that big competitive advantage.
Another thing that people just don't think about it is like the value of your company, the valuation of your company, whether that has to do with your stock price or you want to get ready to sell, and exit your company or whatever. The value of your company is based on a lot of those processes and stuff. That's the maturity levels in your company. And now cybersecurity is becoming one of those things that are being evaluated as far as the valuation of your company for either stock prices or if you want to exit and sell your company. Hey, do you have your cybersecurity house in order?
Yeah, 100%. I think most people don't realize M&A lawyers and firms like that will actually deploy cybersecurity tools within a targeted acquisition and
Absolutely
understand what lives there today, because that's a risk factor, whether you're looking to sell or if you're looking to acquire. Same concepts you should think about, right? Like, hey, if I'm going to do this, what potential risk is going to be invited into my infrastructure?
Yeah. So Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, it just all of these things just make it really show how the expectations are getting more out there. They're less back in the IT room, and they're more in the front, and the expectations are higher. Even whether it's like an M&A sort of scenario. Or Rusty, what you described that we did to help some other clients. It's even within cyber insurance. As we try and help clients, we will see when a policy matures and the new one comes out, what the new expectations are on that policy, and they're ratcheting up because of everything that is happening.
Absolutely. All right.
We're maturing, where the industry is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue into ransomware. I know Dave and we had a really great conversation yesterday. So Dave, I know you and Rusty have some ideas about ransomware. So I'll pass it to you on this to kick us off here.
Sure, and we wanted to take a couple of slides here, starting with ransomware, just talking about what the risks are to an organization. And I think before we get into ransomware, when we talk about these slides for everybody watching, if you can think about cybersecurity, not from our organization and how we're trying to protect our organization, but from the eyes of a criminal and what you're trying to get out of it, and why you're doing this. And whether, before it was a cyber criminal, it was a criminal. And they would have their motives to do things that went outside of the law. And if the odds were well enough to do it, they would try to, that's what they would do. And I think that's where ransomware, even as it hits headlines and stuff right now, that's really been the cyber risk that has commercialized cybercrime. This was the type of attack that can take place where there's a financial reward. If you were just giving somebody a virus or a worm or something like that, it wasn't, you didn't have that cash reward. And ransomware has really allowed that to open up. And it's very successful. That's why we put that in bold right there. Just in the first half of 2021, ransomware attacks are up 151%. So criminals know it, and they're taking advantage of it. And really, if you think about it, if your organization isn't properly prepared to have a recovery from a ransomware attack, you're really on the verge of losing everything. Because if you don't have the processes set up to be able to restore services, then your only other option really is to pay the ransom. And if you can't afford the ransom, there really isn't another door to go after. And a couple of statistics that we have found that we did want to share is, even if you are a victim of ransomware and you pay the ransom, you've got a 23% chance that you're going to be given the key to be able to restore your data. And if you do that, now you have a 73% chance that you're going to get hit again by the same group, because they know that.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in here because,
Please.
people say, well, how would that happen? And one of the things that's very, very common with ransomware, and this is a really large concern, and it's one of the things you need to think about, where you might have us bring in somebody like our co-host here, ArmorPoint, and that's that most of the time when a ransomware attack happens is that the attackers have actually already been in your network for quite some time, and they're doing what's called reconnaissance. So they're cruising around inside your network, cruising around in your computers, and they can do that. I mean, we don't want to get into that in this discussion today, but how technically they can do that. But they move across your network, they move up in your admin centers and stuff. They learn as much about you as possible. Maybe even they learn about your finances to know how much of a ransom to ask for. They might even have access to your insurance paperwork to find out if they're going to pay it or not. I mean, this is the kind of reconnaissance that they will do. So once they hack you, they actually know where everything is. They may have already embedded additional malware or additional keys that they're going to use to attack you again. If they don't, there's a whole market on the dark net for someone who has hacked you to sell that information to somebody else to hack you. So that's why the probability of being hacked again after you get hacked is so high.
That's a great point you bring up about that, like these bad actors knowing how much to ask for. They've done that recon. They think of it almost like from a business perspective. Again, this is a business decision for them. They're set up with CEOs and CIOs and CTOs. They're doing their market research, right? They're trying to figure out how much I can make off of these particular targets, and are they the right kinds of targets that will pay or won't pay? They're doing all of this ahead of time. While we're trying to scale our businesses, they're doing this research on us, and so I guess the point there is if they're making a business decision and setting themselves up like an enterprise, we need to start thinking about how we can set up our processes to combat that.
Part of our coaching that we do with companies is in preparing for a ransomware attack is like, do you have a ransomware negotiator? And you go, what? That's an emerging business now because those people know the kinds of ransomware that are out there, and they know the tactics on how to deal with ransomware cyber criminal companies, because they're out there just like Corey was saying, is that they're looking for a profit. The faster they can get in, the more money they can get in a short amount of time, they'll take it. So a ransomware negotiator might actually be in there and kind of negotiate a deal and get it over with, right? So that they can go on with their business and you can get your company back up and running. People don't even think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think, and to what you guys are saying, but the moment that the criminal encrypts all your data is the moment that they're done getting everything out of you that they want other than money.
Yep.
They're ready at that time.
Yep. Yeah, and I think I read an article probably a week or two ago from a ransomware affiliate group, right, who develop ransomware and then they sell that to other bad actors to then trigger. And if you read this article, which we can definitely drop in the link, very interesting on how they approach it. They use the word like, we filled this niche. There was a niche that was open in this market and we needed to develop something and scale our business, and very much a strategic approach to how they're going out. They had a target market list that they put out of like, these companies need to fit this profile. And again, it's just one of those kind of things that you don't really think about. You think sometimes that they're just criminals, wheeling and dealing, trying to break in, but they're putting strategy behind this, and we just need to be ready for that. And I think this is, the emergence of something big that's going to continue for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, and that's where your guys' solution is so invaluable, to be able to monitor and detect any the activity that's happening within a network where humans aren't normally looking. Mm-hmm. And like you shared, especially if it's a smaller organization, you're dealing with the amount of resources that the organization has.
We'll probably talk about this a little bit more, but there's a strong reason we're teaming with ArmorPoint, and it's because in part of ransomware. And out there, there are a lot of groups, the Secret Service, the FBI, and other government organizations, but also commercial organizations. They're accumulating information called threat intelligence that says, okay, we've seen these kinds of behaviors, even these kinds of processes that these ransomware companies have developed that they use over and over and over again. So threat intelligence might actually identify those processes, and then they might identify host servers that the ransomware is reaching out to on multiple attacks. So what ArmorPoint can do is compare the logs that are being collected within your company, and then compare that to this threat intelligence and says, oh man, there's a process that we recognize. Oh, there's a host server that we recognize that is being used by bad guys, and it matches with something that's being communicated in your network. Malware, anti-malware, antivirus, anti-spam will not do that. So you have to have something that is comparing that threat intelligence to the logs that are being accumulated in your environment. If you don't do that, you can't find that ransomware behavior. If there's anything else that you take away from this meeting today, it's that. Without the kind of thing that ArmorPoint has, your other antivirus, anti-spam, stuff like that, it's just not going to detect ransomware. Did I get that right, Corey?
You did, absolutely, yeah. It's those targeted, sophisticated, long tail attacks, right? That have, like you mentioned earlier, they've been in the network. They got in through an email, which didn't trigger your AV or anti-malware because it wasn't malicious at the time. And they sit there and they navigate, and that's where our team, that people of that triad, people, process, technology, are digging through. We're trying to understand what those breadcrumbs are telling us, right? And that's everyone leaves a breadcrumb trail, whether they're good guys, bad guys. It's always there. You just need to know where to look and how to look for it. And I think that's a really critical piece that, endpoint detection and those are all great firewalls, all great things to have in place in a critical portion of cybersecurity. But you do need to have that, what we like to call the army, right, to back you up. So with that, I think we'll transition into another really hot topic, remote and hybrid workforce.
Yeah, and under this, if we think about how criminals are thinking, and realizing what happened with the pandemic, and everybody really needed to start working remotely, literally overnight. The joke is, you would ask a company, how many new locations did you, say you have a company of 20 employees, and you ask them, well, how many new locations did you open during the pandemic? They're going to laugh and they're going to go, are you crazy? We're doing everything we can just to keep the doors open. We didn't open any new locations. But the reality is you just opened up about 20 new locations, with each individual working from home now. And now you've got those people working from, instead of, maybe being on-prem behind the firewall, where the castle and all of the more legacy network architecture mindsets have been. Now you've got people working from home, sharing the internet with the family, with the kids, and maybe they're using the device that they brought home from work, or maybe they're just using their own personal computer, but now using that to access the network remotely. And when all of this happened, IT people were stretched before this. So it would be so the concept that they were able to additionally provide that layer of protection to remote workers, it just didn't exist. And criminals saw that and jumped on that, have taken advantage. That's why the numbers are so high. And that's what would also, like, again, if you think as a criminal, well, let me send out a spam email that's COVID related, to try and get somebody to click on something out of emotion or understanding what's going on.
So Dave, before you leave that, I mean, a lot of the people in the audience are going, well, I can understand if I was at my big company on-prem, people would attack me there because they know my company and stuff like that. Nobody's going to attack me at home, right? Well, no, that's not the way this works. It's way above. It's kind of like Corey was talking about. These are companies. They're really big companies. They have a lot of funding. They have a lot of money. And if you stop and think about it, well, how is it that I go into Walmart and they know who I am when I'm shopping there and they give me coupons for me, right? Well, they've got these big data tools that says, oh, that's Dave, that's Corey, that's Sam, that's Rusty. Here's what I'll give them to do. That's what the criminals use today. And so that goes out to literally hundreds of thousands of people automatically. It's not some person going, I'm going to try to hack Corey. They're automated tools that go out there, and they have this huge percentage of success on getting into people's home networks and stuff because they're just not protected like their work. Once they're in there, then you bring your computer home from work. You log into your home network where that's been compromised, either through a game or anything else like that. And now you say, but I've got a VPN. I'm going to tie through a VPN to my company, so I'm safe. I've got this encrypted channel. You've got an encrypted channel that's bringing the malware from your home into your company. You get it? It's like, you don't want to do that, right? So somehow you have to separate yourself from your home network. And that's something that we help people do. And then there's one thing I want to bring up. Microsoft has really, really been working on this really heavily. And so now you might see in the news something called Windows 365. And it's literally like Microsoft 365, but it's Windows 365. So it's a virtual machine in the cloud, and you can go use your own home computer, and you can access your work using Windows 365. It's just now coming out. And what happens then is like you reach in the cloud, do your work, but it won't let you download that data to your home machine or your home network. So it protects it up there in the cloud, right? And so those are the kinds of things that the world is changing. The business is changing as a result of all these attacks, all this ransomware and stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons SSO is here, Secure Smart Office is here, is because we can help clients address these new technologies that are coming out to help protect you, whether you're remote or on-prem.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, this remote and hybrid workforce, I know it says new normal. I think we're itching closer and closer to this just being normal. And again, when we talk about a business decision and being strategic, I think we're all starting to realize more and more that, everyone wants to work from home or at least part-time. And so you need to adapt to that, to get new recruits and onboard new employees. A lot of times they're asking, can I work remote? And having that policy and that process in place that Rusty was just talking about to, make sure that yes, you can, and you're secure, and I'm not opening up additional risks, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link. And this remote and hybrid workforce has just created new challenges for small, medium businesses to secure that weakest link.
Yeah, and Rusty, to your point about somebody being able to, once the remote device is compromised, then you can securely send the malware into your connection back at the office.
That way they go, I have a VPN.
Right,
Secure channel to deploy malware in your company.
Yeah, and again, it goes to the point of, like we're saying, by the time a criminal flips the switch and encrypts data, if it's ransomware, they're done. So they've been in those remote devices all of that time up until that.
So, one thing I want to call out on this slide in particular is insider threats, because that's also like near and dear to what we do at ArmorPoint, and like just me personally. It's the idea of like when you hear that word or that phrase, you think, hey, someone in my environment or in my company is trying to download data or do something nefarious. And that's not always the case sometimes. Most of the time, though, it's someone on a remote workstation. They're in someone's home network. They've learned how that person talks, how that person types, the websites they visit. And so they know how to mimic them, right? And so they can get into that internal network. They look and smell like that individual, but again, without something like ArmorPoint or the SSO team and how they help you frame up your processes and deployment, you don't know what to look for, those breadcrumbs, because it looks and feels just like Nancy typing away on her computer. And so that's something that without the right people and processes, most of the technology is going to miss that because it looks and feels just like Nancy.
Corey, that's an excellent point. And in you talking about that, I just think back to cases that we've responded to where people have been hacked, and we can actually see that exchange in emails and other communications where they are acting just like that person within the company and impersonating that person within the company. And we've seen that over and over and over again. And so sometimes it is that actor acting as somebody else in the company. And we do digital forensic sciences and other kinds of response and incident response to try to find out what happened, how to stop the leaks and stuff like that, and how to get the company back on track. And sometimes to give the company data where they can actually go after that person and prosecute them. And then I do want to say, though, there is the other side where it really is a bad actor that's like a disgruntled employee. We've been called in for those as well. And you'd be just amazed what people will do. Well, there was a high level person in a nonprofit that we got called into that every time somebody ordered an iPad, he'd order 10. And every time 10 came in, he'd give the one to the person and he'd sell the other 9. It's like he's actually using the acquisition system because anything above 10 was monitored by somebody else. 10 and below, nobody monitored him, right? And so
Right.
it's just like, man, how do you find that? But that's why we have partners like ArmorPoint and stuff like that. It's really amazing what people will do, whether they're real bad actors internally or unintentional bad actors, because sometimes this happens accidentally by an employee or someone else impersonating somebody. All 3 of those happen.
Yeah, that accidental too, right, is something to be aware of. The employee may not even be malicious about any of their actions. They just happen to click on that link that, offered a free Netflix trial. And that's an insider threat that opened the door, and, can't necessarily chastise. There's security awareness training. That's SSO's job as well to help educate that, right? But those are things you need to be ready for as well. It's just some people will have a bad day and you're just clicking on things that you shouldn't.
Or that training ahead of time to try to prevent people from clicking on the wrong thing, that's great. And that really reduces that risk, but somebody's going to click on something sometime. And that's where you guys come in to be able to help us detect that and respond to it. Dave, you want to say something?
I'm just going to say that if it's a remote worker that's using their home computer rather than one provided by work, and that remote worker has gone through security awareness training and they know what's up, but they're sharing that computer with the family. Then, when, I'm not going to say my wife would ever click on something like that, but if it were a shared computer, that possibility could exist.
I do want to make it clear within SSO, we don't share our computers with our family members, and we don't access SSO networks or our client networks and stuff like that with non-SSO computers. So just want to make that really clear.
Nor would my wife.
Being humorous.
Yeah, nor would my wife ever make a mistake.
If you're listening.
Yeah, because I am working remotely. And then the other thing, just about under the umbrella of insider threats, is if we think about what the company's data is. And if it's the more traditional where somebody's working on premise, there's additional controls there of what's happening with that data. And maybe it's just things where the workstation itself has been set up so USB devices are not allowed. You can't plug in a thumb drive or something like that. That changes to a degree when it becomes remote. Unless that device is configured and the company's really, the employer is going to that degree with clients.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons that, when people go, well, I've got Windows 10 Pro and I've got Microsoft 365, I'm good. Well, what SSO does is we actually, there are thousands of security controls in Windows 10 Pro. And there are just hundreds, if not thousands, of security controls in Microsoft 365. So to Dave's point, one of the things that we can help you do is set up something called conditional access, which only lets your employees access your company's data if they have the right configuration on their computer. So those are the kinds of things that have to be done with the combination of Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft 365. And the security settings within Microsoft 365. So just because I heard SSO, I went out and bought Windows 10 Pro and I got Microsoft 365, I'm good. It's the reason we train and get certified. All those certifications you saw at the beginning is because we have done all the research and development on what are the best security settings within Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft 365 and Azure to help you accomplish your company's mission. Not lock it down so tight you can't get anything done, and not have it so loose then nothing's really protected. But it really does help protect the critical data in your company.
Yeah. Before I transition to this next topic, I think that's such a key point that Rusty just brought up. Like, cybersecurity can be a deterrent too, right? If you lock it down to the point where you can't do anything. So there is that middle ground, right? What's your risk appetite? And SSO is there to help guide, like, here are the critical settings that you need to have on. Here are things that we suggest, but let's learn about your business, right? And what do you need to do? And maybe we can manipulate this and throw something like ArmorPoint in to, hey, we opened a risk door. Let's make sure we're monitoring that. I think that's such a great point to bring up.
Good point, Corey.
Yeah, and anything that we do, we'll be able to explain what we do and the why behind it, and make sure that that's in alignment with what the client needs to be able to be successful and secure at the same time.
Absolutely.
Regulatory compliance.
Yes, everyone's favorite.
Yeah. Well, this is here because regulations really are increasing. Rusty, you remember when we first got into this game, you would find an organization that maybe was bound by one regulation or another. And you would say, okay, well, we're going to build our model and we're going to protect you against that. But now you've got overlapping regulations. So you really have to have a model that takes all of the applicable regulations into consideration, so you are addressing them, and whether it's personal information, credit cards, things like that, we are seeing those, and we are seeing a huge spike in regulations on privacy. We're in California, so there's the Ccpa, and there's because our federal, if you're in Europe, you've got GDPR that basically puts a blanket over all the European companies that says, if you're going to do business, these are the privacy requirements you have to adhere to when you collect the data, how you use the data, manage the data, and ultimately how you get rid of it. In the United States, it's a little more like the Wild West because we don't have a federal regulation yet. So now you've got 50 states, and each state says, well, this is how we're going to do it. And so if you're a business that is dealing not even internationally, but domestically, you've got multiple states that you need to regulations that you need to take into consideration.
So Dave, one of the things we found out with one of our clients, and this is just through interviewing them and getting to know more about them, and they would farm out business. You know, they would subcontract some of the business they were doing. But turns out some of these people were actually in England. And so they're like farming out this code work and stuff like this. And it turns out some of them are in England. Ireland is really trying to outsource software development work. Well, guess what? They're like, well, that's a subcontractor, so not us. No, you are responsible for the subcontractor. You're responsible for GDPR, right? Because because you're subcontractor and you're pushing the work that way, that doesn't relieve you of responsibility for GDPR. You have to meet it. So that's something people really don't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more and more, not like regulatory compliance like HIPAA and PCI, I mean, historically have been seen as check the box, like I just need to get this done so I don't have to get fined. You know, and there's some credence to that. I think PCI is a great one to follow, and NIST 800, 171. If you aren't forced to adhere to HIPAA or PCI or CMMC or anything like that, choose NIST. It's a great framework. Choose CIS 20, and I know Dave's going to go over a little bit of how SSO adapts this. I think all great things, but these privacy regulations is something I want to touch on. I have seen small businesses, medium businesses, and large businesses lose opportunities because they're maybe in Nevada trying to do business in California and they don't adhere to CCPA. They don't have those processes in place. So it can be a deterrent to growing your business if you're not thinking ahead of what do I need to have in place today as I scale? What am I going to do to make sure I'm successful for tomorrow?
One of the things that again, we serve as virtual chief information security officers. And one of the things that we advise our clients is like, make sure you have a good legal representative, like a general counsel, because they're going to keep up to speed on all the things that are going on. We just gave a webinar on ransomware the other day. And as part of that research, I found out the Department of Treasury will fine you if you pay the ransomware.
Mm-hmm.
If you pay the ransom, not the ransomware, if you pay the ransom. They're like, what? The U.S. Department of Treasury is going to fine me? Yes, because when you pay that ransom to that foreign company, you're now funding a foreign company to attack American companies. So it's OFAC, it is a department within the Department of Treasury, or an organization within the Department of Treasury. And like you're basically funding an enemy of the United States to attack United States companies.
Yeah.
So, to avoid that fine, you can actually cooperate with the FBI and they'll waive the fine and stuff like that. But who knew, right? That's the kind of stuff you need a legal representative for.
Yeah, and if you're in that spot where you just got ransomware and you're trying to figure out what to do over the next 24 or 48 hours, those aren't the kinds of things you're taking into consideration, you know. And one other thing, if I'm not cutting you guys off, is even if someone's out there going, yeah, but I don't deal with healthcare, I don't deal with credit cards, I'm not a Department of Defense subcontractor or anything like that. These sorts of requirements are, like we were saying, you're starting to see those more and more be present in just getting in cyber insurance. The expectation that you are doing these additional steps is that's just something else that's growing and evolving right in front of us as well.
Dave, you have to do it too, because when you answer the questionnaire, it's like answering a life insurance questionnaire. Oh, I don't smoke, you know, and then you die and they find out you're a smoker. They're not going to pay. And so if you go, oh yeah, I've got multi-factor authentication, you know, I'm doing my backups. Yeah, give me this cyber insurance thing. And so you get hacked and then they check and you don't have MFA. They're not going to pay. So folks, you have to do it. It's just part of business, which is what this whole webinar is about.
Yeah, it's getting stricter and stricter, and you're going to continue to see as these cyber insurance companies, who are still pretty young in the grand scheme of things, you've just started to see over the past couple of years more and more pop up. As they learn what that market is and how prevalent some of this is going on, they're getting stricter and stricter, as they should. And that just means we need to adapt. And again, this is to Rusty's point. It's a business decision. Just getting cyber insurance, like how integrated is cybersecurity into our culture, not just from a technology perspective, but from our day-to-day.
Exactly.
actions.
Well said, Victor.
Back to you, Dave.
All right.
It's quiz time.
Is that
Quiz time.
There it is.
Quiz time.
Right. How often does a business fall victim to a ransomware attack? And please, if you have the answer, go ahead and throw it in the chat. Is it A, every 3 minutes, B, every 45 minutes, C, every 40 seconds, or D, every 8 minutes?
Sam, tell them what they win.
He's not going to tell them what they want.
I was like, he's not telling anyone.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Fine. Winner will get a $25 Amazon gift card, courtesy of ArmorPoint.
I really did try to say that. Fine.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. B is not the correct answer. Do we have?
All right, Mike. Thank you. Well, we're almost there.
Yeah.
Anybody want to
Someone tells me the next person's going to get it right.
Hey, Matt. All right, Matt. That is correct. It's every 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Well done, man.
Good job, Matt. Yeah.
We were talking the other day, it's more likely for you to get hacked by any sort of malware than be in a traffic accident.
Yeah.
You're more likely to be hacked than be in a traffic accident. Yet every time you get in your car, you'll put on that seatbelt, and you should. But when you go to work, you're not putting on your cyber seatbelt, right? You're like, oh, I'll risk it.
Great
That's
analogy.
beyond me.
Yeah,
Great
you know, and
analogy.
you got a point to that, Rusty, because, and it's probably the way things are going, but the reason people are so quick to put on that seatbelt was because it became a regulation.
Well, that's what we're talking about. Hey, what's this?
Yeah.
Hey, Corey, were you going to say something? You started to say something.
No, that's a great analogy. I love that, right? We always talk about, when you leave your house, you lock your front door, right? You do those basic things. We should really start thinking about how we're doing that from a business perspective. So great point.
To me, people not using cybersecurity is like, okay, I've got this store downtown, but I don't need to lock my doors or windows. I trust people.
Yeah, I'll leave my garage open when I leave, like no worries. Yeah. Yep.
All right, anyway, Dave, what do you got?
Well, yeah. Well, on this slide, what we wanted to share is, for all of the things that we're talking about, how we at SSO work to help protect our clients. And what we have done is, and this was specifically built and designed to help support small businesses, like Rusty was saying earlier. And this is our 5-point secured IT framework that we use. And as Corey was saying earlier, there is a NIST framework, there's CIS 18, there's other ISO. There's a lot of fantastic ones out there. But when companies are small enough, those can look a little overwhelming, or where do I start? So our model here is mapped to all of those to make sure we don't let anything fall through the cracks. But what we do when we speak with a client up front is we want to identify, if you look at the column to the left, we're going to identify the client's hardware, software, credentials, the data that they have, and staff. And then we do the two-dimensional matrix against measuring those against inventory, governance, budget, security, and process. And we will map these. And the idea is we want to find out where a client is initially, so we can communicate to them what's going on, as well as understand their industry and what their overall business goals are. And as we map those, it goes against a maturity index. So the higher the number you score, the better you're doing. And the colors in this are designed to show if it's red. Let's just imagine this is where a company is beginning when we first get to start working with them. And if you see the red, that's where they've got the most amount of work to grow. And the idea is they go from, as we work with them and have the opportunity to do reviews as we're implementing stuff, is we want to turn as many reds into yellow, into a light green, then a darker green, and then ultimately blue if it's possible, which is at the most mature state that they can be in.
So the reason we did this, and thanks for going through that, Dave, is that it's just kind of English, right? So you start with inventory, because if you don't know what you have, you can't protect it. It's just that simple. And so we start with hardware inventory, because if you don't know what phones or computers or whatever that you have, how can you protect it, right? You can't install anything to protect it if you don't know it's there. And so a lot of people say, well, I've got two people and I know we both have, PCs or whatever. It turns out we need a digital inventory, because if you have a digital inventory, you can combine it with the other things. So let's look at that. You got a hardware. Now that you know what hardware you have, what software is running on that hardware? If you don't know what is good software, how do you know what is bad software or unauthorized software? So you have to know the hardware, you have to know the software that's running on it. And then you have to know what data is being manipulated by that software, right? It's being changed, it's being deleted, it's being created and stuff like that. So the data is the next important thing. And then the credentials is like, how do you access that data? How do you access that hardware, right? And you have to have a handle on that. And then finally, you have to know who should have access to that computer, who should have access to that data, who should have access to those credentials. Sometimes it's an admin, sometimes it's an executive, sometimes it's an IT admin. But that's the way it works. It basically builds up from got to know your hardware, got to know what software is running on it, what data the software is manipulating, credentials to access the data, and then who should have access to that hardware, those credentials, and even software sometimes. And then as it moves to the right, it's just, again, governance just means there's some instructions on what we should do. Budget, if you don't have budget, somebody used to tell me is that vision without funding is hallucination, right? So you can say, I want to have this great network. I want to have this great IT capability. I want to have great cybersecurity, but you don't have a budget set aside for it. So when we go and talk to companies, they go, well, I really haven't set aside a budget. Well, then you're not going to do this, are you? Right? Because it's part of that business decision that we talked about early on. If you don't have a budget allocated to this, then it's not part of your business strategy, right? It has to, you got to put money aside or it's just not going to happen. And then you secure stuff. And then the process is just like Corey was talking about, where you have process technology people. I mean, it's the process. How often do you do this? What process do you do to update your inventory? And we use something called proactive inventory that's literally going out and discovering things as they get added into your inventory so that that digital inventory is constantly updated. So if you stop, it's summary, if you have a digital version of hardware, software, data, password, and or credentials and staff inventory, you can then combine those in the right way. This kind of data, this kind of person should be running in this part of the network. And once you have that digital version of each of those inventories, you can start putting those things together using automation and modern management. Without it, you're in 1990s technology, guys. 1990s.
Yeah,
before,
and just
go ahead.
okay, I was just going to say, and then I'll hand the microphone over to you, Corey. It's just what we have learned is simply by applying this model, we can immediately make a client between 75 and 80% more secure and more stable. And then from there, we can work with them. Like it says, have the opportunity to partner with ArmorPoint and work with them to support what their overall business objectives are. But this is just a great shot straight out of the gate towards going from an ad hoc state to being in a much better position.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, what I love about this is like NIST, great framework, but really meant for DoD, right? So there's some pretty strict things in there, and CIS 18, CIS 20, a little bit better for the small business, but it's still general, right? And I think both Rusty and Dave mentioned a few things about learning your business and being able to tailor this to your business. I think that's what I love most about this is not everyone fits into CIS 20 or NIST or anything that, again, great frameworks, but what Secure Smart Office has developed here can really be tailored to your business and make it customized essentially to you. Yeah, there's basic foundations that everyone should be doing. I just wanted to add that I think this is really a great thing for small and medium businesses to work off of.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it does map to the CIS 18, by the way.
Oh, beautiful, even better.
There were some things missing there that we put in here that we think are important for small companies. But
love it. I won't spend too much time on how ArmorPoint can help. I know we're about 4 minutes, so I do want to leave some time for questions. But really, four key areas. There's a ton of different things that ArmorPoint works on, but reliability of your network. Making sure that we're ensuring that things are running properly, right? They're up and functioning as you need them, and being notified when things start to look a bit wonky. Again, being proactive about that. Compliance, we've really hammered home on that from a business perspective. How can we help maintain, check those boxes, make sure that we're putting in the right technology and processes on the back end with a 24/7 monitoring solution. Threat protection or threat identification, I should say, knowing, talking about that insider threat and the breadcrumb trail and what we call, we utilize something called MITRE ATT&CK internally as well. Definitely look that up. really understanding the behavior of different processes and people and actions, and how do we tie those together to really understand, is this a threat? Is this something that I should be aware of? And again, being proactive before that ransomware detonates, right? Stopping those bad actors before they get to that point. And then protection. There's a ton of different technologies out there. And I think this is always a great starting point to say, hey, I have next-gen antivirus, I have anti-malware. We help provide anti-ransomware technologies, and those are great to have that automated threat protection that covers 95% of those bad actors and terminating it. It's those 5 to 10% that really require that threat identification, the processes that Secure Smart Office just went over, marrying those people, processes, and technology. I hammer on that a lot. But marrying those together in an integrated fashion, that's what ArmorPoint and SSO together bring to the table. Each one of these cards, when we send this out after, they have use cases within them. So you can always dive in and learn a little bit more about how others have implemented ArmorPoint in that monitoring service in the past. So we'll send that out. But with that, with 2 minutes left, I know we have one more quiz here. And Sam, I'll pass it over to you.
Quiz time.
Quiz time.
Quiz time.
What is an organization's biggest threat vector in terms of potentially falling victim to a cybercrime? Is it A, unpatched devices, B, employees, C, insecure networks, or D, encrypted data? And yes, right off the bat, Matt, boom, it is B, employees.
That goes back to those insider threats, right? Being able to understand what's going on, hammering.
Can't live with them and can't live without them.
Yeah, exactly. It's always the people. That's true.
Yeah. Well said.
All right. I know we have about a minute with a lot of time. Sam, I'll pass it to you to see, questions. Feel free for those in the chat, pop those over. I know we have a couple that have been sent our way already.
Yeah, actually, just because we're so short on time, would you mind going to the next slide real quick, and then we can circle back? Because we do want to let everybody know that if anybody's interested in a demo of what ArmorPoint can bring to the table, I would be happy to show you. No pressure, just give you a better understanding of how it works and see if maybe it's a value to your organization. Just let us know. They're being generous enough with a $50 Amazon gift card to walk through with people. And Sam, do you have the link for our assessment?
I do.
If you can share that in the chat. This is an online complimentary cybersecurity assessment that SSO offers. So if you want to get an initial idea of where you're at without any pressure or anything, please visit that link. You can fill out the form and we'll follow up with you. In either scenario, there's no pressure. We're just trying to help make our communities more secure.
So we're actually so passionate about that. We have a slogan in our company, passion to protect, and our company is on a mission to help protect small and medium-sized businesses here in America. So much so that we actually run a nonprofit called Protecting Tomorrow. So if you go to protectingtomorrow.org, you'll see that we give many free presentations to the elderly, to high school students, to grade school students, to we run boot camps at the universities here, all just to educate our communities about cybersecurity and the threats that they face, all part of the nonprofit that we also run. So that's just the passion that we have to try to help protect our communities.
I love that. I mean, it starts foundationally, right? I was lucky enough to grow up in a family that cybersecurity was like ingrained in what we did. And so there's blessings and curses to that for sure. But I think it's so important. So I love that you guys do that. I think that's so critical from early education to the elderly. It's something that touches our personal lives, our professional lives, and making sure that we're as educated as possible is really critical. So that's really cool that you guys do that.
Sam is really passionate. He set up that, we were talking about his son earlier, and he set up a Chromebook years and years ago for his son just to kind of control what his son is doing. And his son just created a new profile and bypassed everything that was on the Chromebook. I'm not saying you would have done anything like that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So,
We'll keep that quiet.
And then I did just drop in another link into the chat just to share. Next week, Rusty and I, on behalf of ISACA San Diego, are going to be hosting the monthly meeting, and the topic on that is going to be ransomware. So if anybody's interested, that webinar is available, no cost as well, to try and continue to play it forward and share as much information with people as we can.
we do want to respect your time, so we really appreciate you being with us here today with ArmorPoint and Secure Smart Office. Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I
Yes.
really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I want to, and then anybody that did send in a question, we'll just follow up with those separately and directly to make sure everybody's, all the questions are getting taken care of. But I just want to say thank you to everybody that attended and to everybody on the ArmorPoint team that helped to make this happen, and to Sam and Rusty, who I see every day, and I appreciate the opportunity to share the information that we can.
Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Right on. Thanks.